Hello, welcome back to Inside Music Curation. We're the team at Feed Media Group. We help businesses power music in apps. And on Inside Music Curation, we love getting together. These are my esteemed colleagues from our music curation team. We talk all things music curation, from genre to use cases to music trends. And today is the third in our series of three about hip hop turning 50. We got together a few months back and talked about the origins of hip hop, the history of hip hop. We talked last month about regional movements and how that affected, the music and the culture. And today we're bringing it up to current time. We want to talk all about hip hop at 50. What does it look like today? What is hip hop in 2023? So I'm going to kick it to you, Stens, to start us off and give us your 2 cents on where hip hop is today.
Yeah, you got it. Well, so let's just talk about the last decade briefly, and that'll provide some context for what we want to get into today, which is all this amazing female-powered hip hop that we're seeing, that we're most excited about. And we're going to spend most of our time talking about all these incredible female MCs. Um, but I wanted to acknowledge that I think the last decade in a name has been owned by Kendrick Lamar. Obviously, many owners of it, but I think artistically has set a supremely high bar for what it is to carry forward hip hop traditions and evolve them, and to path break. And even his double album, Mr. Morales, which we've talked about in a prior Inside Music. I mean, I think that was another masterpiece. Really challenging piece, not so much with the radio hit signals and stuff, but Kendrick Lamar shows no signs of flagging whatsoever. Some of his male peers have seemingly narrowed their styles, and I'm being a little simplistic, but to the point of some monotonous predictability, where like Lil X and Lil Y and Lil Z sound very similar. Some of that's kind of an auto-tune thing, some of that's kind of a trap thing where it's like really minimalist and kind of stripped down. And then 10 plus years at the top of the game, right? Drake. Okay, so there was Drake, and then there was Kendrick, and there's still Drake, right? He isn't always inspired to push things forward, right? He can be supremely amazing, as we know, and I think his Honestly Nevermind was a really cool pivot into dance that was totally unexpected, super fun, super different, unexpected. But I think his dominance in Juan and I talked about this a little bit beforehand. His dominance in hip hop is a bit of a canary in the coal mine for hip hop, being a little stagnant, if you get the metaphor. And I also just too want to say, like, as is often the case in hip hop, sadly, heartbreakingly, and very upsettingly, as a hip hop fan, there have been deaths in the past several years too that have robbed us of incredible artistic talent and some pushing forward. And I think two call outs to me that I really, even in their death, become more excited about it. And it's painful is are Juice World and Pop Smoke. I mean, they had really unique voices. They had already done a lot, and we were robbed of this opportunity. So within this broader context, and I've been intentionally focusing on male MCs, as is sadly often the case. The last 5 or 6 years, women have been revolutionizing hip hop, and are definitely the most exciting thing right now. And that's a pretty unequivocal statement. Like, it shouldn't be a binary decision, but do I want to listen to male hip hop or female hip hop right now? Forget about it. I want to listen to female hip hop. I want to hear their voices. I want to hear their representation. I want the freshness of it, this infusion into hip hop, with much more just volume and variety of female voices and point of view is so overdue and so refreshing. And there are so many young startup artists that are doing already really great stuff. So how did we get here in terms of all the female MCs, right? Like, there are multiple mics now for females. How did we get here, Juan, to this point of multiple mics for the women?
So I'm just going to go ahead and say it's the shot heard across the world, right? And that moment was when Nicki and Cardi essentially had, well, both of them in their own sense, but mostly the media had to come to terms with, why are we covering just one female, right? That is one aspect. And then the other aspect of it is that with Nicki and Cardi, two contrasting different styles, right? which really helped open up the doors for a lot of the new female artists that are out today. And a part of that has to do with the fact that uh, Cardi B is an artist that came from more of a organized background, coming from love and hip hop. It was an easier trajectory into stardom from that base point, where Nicki was an artist, as in like she was a rapper from the beginning. Not that it really takes from either or, right? But what that does is that it provides a little bit of context into how the media sources were pitting these two women against each other. And this wasn't the only time we've seen that happen in media, but I think this was the straw that broke the camel's back. Because after this time period of, you know, the Nicki, Cardi B kind of feuding thing, which was really in the same way as Biggie and Tupac was really manufactured by media, right? The same way. And I think what that did was it put a call out to the world where it's not that we just need more women. We need to stop comparing women to each other because it's not fair. You know, everyone has their own individual voice. And in this instance, with Cardi and Nicki, two influential and powerful voices in this community, I think that it took that moment in order to really have what we have now. And that's only just one part of the trinity of what those two artists really gave us, which, you know, Cardi gave us a higher ceiling for pop like stardom, really. And Nicki just gave us more technical and more just like influence on the musical spectrum, you know, the voices she has, the cadences she has, pushing it forward probably a little more forward than most males. So it's honestly, that moment in time has really sparked this up. And Claire, would you like to talk about any of like the new, like what's going on right now? Because I know that you have been really up on that.
Yeah. I mean, I do want to even just touch back on sort of, I think there is an interesting sort of, time in media that is both allowing this to happen of, I mean, and even just sort of like changing in the tenets of feminism. You're seeing it in females in comedy and in other areas of media of it not being competitive based, in that there's only room for one, but working together, lifting each other up, who understands the experience of, being a minority group within another subculture, better than other women trying to make it in hip hop. So I think that's really exciting to be seeing those collaborations coming together. And it's no longer, Drake and Future and whoever only tapping Nicki. It's like the men are able to tap a whole host now of female rappers, and the female rappers are working together and bringing their fan bases together and creating even bigger hits. And I also think like part of hip hop's more move into pop sometimes has to do with the female artists, in terms of, in ways that their male counterparts do not. There's typically like some like singing and rapping involved. And that sort of like melodic nature sort of appeals more to pop audiences. So they're really both in sort of like the growth of the hip hop audience. I do think they're responsible for that in a lot of ways. And yeah, I just think there's, lots of regional styles happening, with younger artists, and they've got, really great examples. And you've got historically, you've got, Missy Elliott and Eve and Salt and Peppa, and like you have this history of women in hip hop that is small in a lot of ways, and it's really broadening out. And they do have such strong figures to, look up to and who are working with them. And like Nicki's collaborating with Ice Spice, and it's not like, oh, like let's isolate these younger artists and make them earn it on their own. It's like, let's bring everybody up together. And so I think that's really exciting and is making for interesting sounds, along with the ability of like, in researching more, I'd heard a lot of the songs that we have a featured playlist up, and then sort of dove more into their stories. And yeah, like TikTok's playing a huge role in the ability to self promote and create music. And therefore, female rappers are able to, have their own avenue to make their career what they want it to be and not be sort of reliant on the older tenets of the establishment within the music industry to get discovered. They're, letting their work and skills, show it themselves.
You touched on so many great elements there, right? Like there's different paths, that people are taking via TikTok and social media, touching on, how much hip hop has influenced pop music itself, which is something that we talked about, in our year-end report. All of these things are really coming together. Stens, what were you about to say?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think, as usual, having the perspective Claire brings as somebody who's really studied and is knowledgeable about the gender inequality that exists in the music industry, and that this is not a new thing in hip hop, right? That women have been excluded. It is in some ways maybe more pronounced or more visibly a problem, and it by no means has been course corrected, right? I mean, look at the Billboard 100, and you're still going to see mostly male rappers on there, but this upswell of female rappers is really exciting, and the diversity there is also fun. I mean, just to get a little bit into that for a minute, just to geek out on kind of what we have right in front of us as far as these incredible female MCs. Like Doja Cat to me is just, I mean, and I'm not the only one, she's tremendously impressive, right? She's a shrewd marketer who like does a great job of kind of capitalizing on the Prince kind of style of artists, where it's the whole thing. It's the wardrobe, it's the presentation, it's the whole artistic package, capital A, right? But when you just auditorially, she delivers as a fantastic rapper and an exceptional singer, right? Like where I think, there are some precedents to that of like Lauryn Hill, obviously, and Missy Elliott and some others that Juan might bring up too, that I'm talking from the kind of hip hop to singing side. And then we saw kind of some singing to hip hop side, this convergence happening in the late 90s, early 2000s. But Doja, I listen to Doja sing or rap full stop, right? She doesn't need a collaborator to make a great song. And then you got Megan Thee Stallion, who just like bar for bar, she spits the hell out of it. Like, forget about it. Like, I wouldn't want anybody going up against her as an MC in a freestyle, be they male, female, whatever. They're going to get crushed. I mean, she's just a sick spitter. She doesn't have to sing. She's earned it. She deserves to be right there. And then, I mean, we'll talk about some of the younger women that we've been listening to that are in our playlist, but I got to give a quick shout across the ocean to Lil Sims. She's not new anymore, but she's still under the radar for US audiences. And there's a whole grime scene in the UK, of course, and I'm by no means an expert, but it is so cool and interesting musically that it is its own thing, musically, right? But these rappers have drawn on, all these musical elements of UK society, namely a lot of dance and electronic, but they know their bars. Like they can spit the hell out of it. And Little Sims, like you can tell she spent just as much time listening to Biggie as anything in UK. I highly recommend anyone to check out Little Sims. Every time I hear her work, and just like she deserves much more break stateside because her music lands emotionally and it lands lyrically. So there's a lot of diversity right now. I mean, I didn't even touch on 3, 4, 5 of the other up and comers. I mean, I'll just kind of pass the mic. Like, who's next? Like, who are you excited on right now? Let's go back to you, Claire, that you've got excited on for listening to. You talked about the pop ones. Who are some of these female MCs that are doing a good job with like gap straddling pop and hip hop?
Yeah, I think Coi Leray, I'm really excited about her. Lotto obviously has had huge hits and collaborations, and I think is probably more maybe the more pop leaning, and then obviously like Ice Spice got tapped by Taylor Swift to do a remake, and that is a one-way rocket ship. So But like, built on, yeah, it's a cosign, but built on, I think, her own merit as a rapper and an artist. And I think what I think is cool, sort of cross genrely, but especially with females in hip hop, is like you're seeing a lot of them finding their identities in borrowing and choosing, like, from predecessors, from their own sort of artistic backgrounds. And I think the traceability of those influences are even much more cross genre than than it maybe would be for male rappers, in terms of, you look at a Megan Thee Stallion being from Houston, idolizes Beyonce, her sort of like stage presence and all of that is going to reflect some of that. Beyonce very much influenced by Tina Turner and all that sort of stuff. And so we've, crossed genres, from early stages of rock and roll into R&B and pop and hip hop, and all of those elements live together in a really unique way, that I think when audiences perceive that, are super receptive and excited about it.
And Juan, you talked a little bit about some of the other ways that today's artists are kind of bridging the generations and, interpolating, and, can you share some of those examples?
Yeah. I mean, so for me, a lot of pop is cyclical, right? Back in the late 90s, Wyclef, Puff Daddy, who was it? I forget who produced Hard Knock Life, but there was this
Jay-Z. I can't remember who produced it for Jay-Z, but yeah. I don't know. But yeah.
But you're feeling what I'm dropping, right? So it's like right now in hip hop with these new new rappers, right? Female, awesome, but they're rappers to begin with, right? And they are, and I don't want to say they're utilizing it, right, the same way that Puffy and Wyclef use it, because I think for them, it was more bringing it as a throwback, right? But what I love about this new generation of rappers is that they're utilizing this music to invoke power, right? When you have Bia rapping over, and I'm so sorry, I forget the name of the song that Little John, it's the Bia Bia song, but I don't even think I'm even allowed to say it here, right? But they're repurposing these very masculine, very not masochistic, but what's the other word? Misogynistic. I'm sorry, misogynistic, like feeling, right? And they're reversing it. They're like going like, all right, word, I'm going to take that beat and I'm going to flip it. That's so hip hop, hip hop has always been kind of a song through time about struggle, right? In happiness and in sadness, right? Sten's actually shared an article earlier today, actually, which was about women, in the sense that males are also kind of like machismo. Now women are really coming out with their feminine power, right? And how powerful that is right now. And the fact also, and I'm just going to say one thing too, because I really do believe that media extinguishes some flames, right? There was a great song, 99 or 2000. It was Whitney Houston, Eve, Christina Aguilera, and I think it could have been Mary J. Blige. It was called Ladies Night. I don't know if anybody remembers that song. That song was huge.
That song was dope. That was the cover of the older one, and it was huge. It was awesome.
What I'm so glad about today, right, is that the industry didn't see that then. They didn't see how big a moment that was. Or even like, when Eve was doing songs with freaking, what do you call it? Like Gwen Stefani, thinking about those pop collaborations that happened and that build the road that these women were allowed, not these women, but like these rappers are allowed to travel on. And the biggest catalyst, the biggest push, the biggest nitro kind of push to all this was that Nicki and Cardi feud finally getting analyzed, right? Because they're still feuding. I don't know. Doesn't matter to me. But What matters to me is that people are listening, they're analyzing, and they're being critical to what's going on and the information that we're getting about these artists. And I think that's a big proponent, as well as what Claire was saying with TikTok, social media, that is really pushing this forward.
Yeah, I agree. I think, yeah, it's definitely not to be underestimated, the like, yeah, positioning of women in society. You know, that the music industry has reflected that in a lot of ways, for sure.
I was just going to add on that the power that we've been talking about, that a lot of these female rappers manifest, I think that also coalesced in WAP, right? With, Megan Thee Stallion and Cardi B, with just the unapologetic fearlessness of talking about sexuality in really blunt, graphic terms, right? And refusal to be silenced or to back down or to be made, you know, uh, an enemy, because they can rap about anything they want to. The same as men, they can go in whatever direction they want to go, right? Like everyone should be able to, right? We haven't mentioned it, but Lil Nas X, and I know we're focusing on women, but I think the broadening in general of the hip hop spectrum to more diverse voices and perspectives is awesome, right? And the LGBTQ community also starting to play a more active role and being allowed to play a more active role too in the hip hop, because that's what I think. Like hip hop is really, again, sorry, but like, back in the day, any platter could earn its set, or any record could earn its place on the platter if it had a good break. That's the roots of hip hop. I could throw anything on the platter, and if it plays well, it doesn't matter what it came from. Similarly, the way we are as human beings, that's the way hip hop should be. Boom, here's me. If I put myself on this platter and I represent something that's interesting and cool and stylistically and lyrically bold and different, I got a place to be here, right? 100%. And so I think that is part of the evolution of hip hop for the next 50 years, is like realizing the promise that it was, right? Of just not being, and it's based on marginalized communities, right? And expressing their points of view. And I know it's ironic that I'm saying this, but that's part of the power of hip hop that can never be forgotten or taken away, and opening it up more broadly than the typically male, urban males who have, vocalized everything. It's a place for everyone. It should be, right? To do it with authenticity, right? Hopefully.
Yeah, 100%. I think, it's tough to talk about hip hop without talking about community, right? Like it grew out of this community, right? It's more than the beats and the rhymes. It's culture, it's community, it's giving people a voice and a stage and a microphone. And so it's really exciting to see, how that's evolved. Again, we've talked about the history, we've talked about where we are now. Like, what are you guys most excited for in hip hop? Like, where is hip hop going? What are you looking forward to next? The unknown.
I'm gonna quote Mos Def because it's just so awesome, right? On his debut album, Black on Both Sides, it starts off with like, what's going on. He does kind of a monologue. What's going on with hip hop? People ask me, where's hip hop going? And this was in 2000 or 99. He's like, I'll tell you what's going on with hip hop. Whatever happens with us, whatever's going on with us. So it's just like, what's going on with us, right? And so as a culture, as a society, what's live right now is diversity is live, whether people are pro or anti. So I think diversity, right? Sexuality is always a big part of, hip hop, and violence too. And also just like, I don't know. I mean, I think part of musically what's going to happen is, and I can't take credit for this, I need to attribute this to something I read recently, is it's going to start to percolate and penetrate musically into other facets of music, maybe in unacknowledged ways that it came back to hip hop, but it's just going to keep spilling over into all these other facets of music and genres of music in ways that it's good to attribute and say like, hey, hip hop started that. And it will also enrich musically what we're listening to. Also, it will become more interesting and more diverse.
Yes, and 100% what you said, Stens. one of the beautiful things about hip hop is that every 5 years it reinvents itself, literally. If you look at it from the time of inception to now, how many different styles, how many new influencers, how many people have been contributing to the pipeline of hip hop. Whereas if you were to, and I don't like to compare or contrast, but it's an interesting thing to look at when you look at factors like rock or jazz and how many times that style changes throughout time. And one of the things about hip hop is, yeah, it's going to be going in, it's already going into a whole mess of different genres. But I think the thing about it is the essence of hip hop is so human in a way where you can create hip hop with your hands and your voice, right? Whereas other music, it's like, I need a piano, I need this, I need that, Hip hop is so basic, but therefore so impactful because it is just able to insert itself into every conversation. 50 years old, baby. Still good.
Yeah, and I'd say too, like, I'm mostly excited just like for the boundaries that are going to, keep pushing, especially as that comes from, the smaller contingencies within hip hop. But also, just from a visibility standpoint, I'm excited to see these artists get mainstream recognition. I want to see their songs on the Billboard charts. I want to see them on the list of nominees for various awards. I want to have their live performances, be a part of those award shows and sort of where the visibility starts to show, to really reflect, even if you're not paying attention to the music industry in the way we are, that you're able to like really visibly feel like, hey, there's been a shift. And I think we're seeing more of that, and we'll continue to do so.
Right on. I think that's a lovely way to wrap it all up, right? Like, going into the future, not exactly sure, but it's going to reflect whatever is going on, and hopefully it gets amplified in many different ways and reaching all corners. So thank you guys so much for taking this journey with us into hip hop, past, present, future, all of it. If you're interested in learning more, you'll find us at feedmediagroup.com, and check us out here inside Music Curation. We're here the first Wednesday of the month talking all about topics around music curation. Any other closing statements, you guys? Any shout outs? Want to end with some shout outs, just your hip hop favorites, anything in general?
Yes. Shout out Nicki Minaj, right? Because I hope you retweet this, Nicki. Please, for the bar. Thank you. Appreciate you.
I mean, I already shouted out the woo. We'll shout out Little Sims so she can retweet this. I'm going to shout out my wife, Christina, and my son, Jack, who almost was born Jack Rizza, but he's Jack Resner. That's cool. We saved it for Rihanna and A$AP Rocky. More appropriate. Shout out to hip hop. Hip hop has enriched my life in ways that I can never give back in terms of musical enjoyment, perspective, and moving me as an individual past some of my white privilege. I still have a long journey to go, but hip hop has been, a multifaceted blessing in my life. So shout out to hip hop.
Yeah, and I guess shout out what a privilege it's been to work through this series with you both, and your vast hip hop knowledge is a cornerstone of it, and being able to realize even I had more knowledge than maybe I anticipated from the beginning, but is truly a segment of and a subculture of being in the music industry that I really enjoy, and then I feel like I should also just end on, for this topic of women in hip hop, and on a Coi Leray lyric that is, "'Cause girls is players too." There you go.
Hell yeah.
That's it. Thanks, you guys. Thanks for joining us.